the questions I get a lot of is, Rog, can you walk through the sequence of your week or your day? And I thought, let's kick it off from the Tuesday conversation that we had, where I was looking at the 4 different ways you could trade the S&P and why I was looking for that. And the why had a lot to do with XLK. This is the tech ETF, number 1 weighted in the S&P, number 1 weighted, by the way, in the NASDAQ. And keep that in mind, because we're going to come back around to the NAS in just a moment. And looking for the S&P, right? On Tuesday, I said, I want to be a buyer of the S&P if it dipped down into the daily price movement range. And some of you might remember that. And that's exactly what we were looking to set up on Thursday. So I'm going to show you right here what we were looking to do on that swing. Here we go. You can see buy SPY November 17. 4:33 call. And what I wanted to do was really very much in the spirit of what I outlined on that Tuesday video. And what was the timing, right? So I already know I want to be a buyer. I want to be long calls. Great. What was going to be the timing on that? Well, the reason I was thinking about this on Tuesday is I knew we had the Wednesday and Thursday Powell events. And it was the second, as we like to call him, Powell event that actually triggered the move towards our zone. If you'll notice, I missed this by just a little bit. All right, it just did not get low enough to the level that I needed. Okay, now remember I mentioned XLK and XLF, right? XLK has been the main driver. It's been the strongest cylinder, if you will, of the engine that is the XLK and the engine that is the NASDAQ and the S&P. All right, so keep that in mind. Number 1 weighted sector. S&P got really close. Well, I'm going to show you what the other thing we wanted to do was. I was looking at Google. I was looking at Apple. I was looking at Microsoft. We were looking at SMH, right? And so on the QQQ, which is absolutely just another way to take advantage of the XLK and the strength in tech, we bought the 367 calls. Once again, similar timing. So anytime I like the S&P, it's because I like tech and financials. If I like tech and say communications, if I like what Apple, Microsoft, Meta, Google are doing, my better trade is going to be the Qs. But SPY was still very much part of the conversation. QQQ just happened to trigger. There's a 4th sector to keep an eye on, and you'll notice in the notes. And by the way, if you're wondering, what are these notes, Rog? In the Sector Secrets Mastery, I keep an active set of notes anytime I'm in the room because it keeps traders from having to say, Rog, what did you just say? Or, I don't call audibles, right? As I like to say, I'm not Peyton Manning calling Omaha, right? Nothing wrong with that, but I'm always going to make sure everything is as documented clearly as possible so traders can come back in to the conversation, read a few lines of notes and say, okay, this is where we're at. This is what we're looking at. And these ultimately map to the alerts I send out, like the SPY, QQQ, and SMH that I sent out to capitalize on Powell's second speaking event this week. All right, so SMH was on that list too. The SMH setup, let me show you that. All right, here we go. The SMH setup was to buy the 17 November 150 call when price got down to 150.70. All right, and again, using the daily price movement range. So that was a pretty easy fill. Again, thank you, Powell, for that Powell-led pullback. And then lastly, we had 2 triggers for the Qs, right? I wanted to buy the 17 November 367, not only at 370.63, I wanted to buy them as we pull back to 370.16. Now, there's a big difference in adding to a position, which I am categorically against, and having predetermined levels in advance so that I can budget these out, understand the risk to my account, understand the dollar risk overall, and then know that as we slice down through 2 levels, right? One here, I'm going to put that budget, that set amount of dollars to work, right? Which is exactly what I want to do, have a predetermined set of levels. Remember, gang, most of the time adding is unfortunately a response to what? The first entry not holding, so we reduce the cost basis on the second, but what's the percentage risk to the account? And has a trader thought about if I keep quote unquote adding, which I think is a 4-letter word, if I keep adding, ultimately, what is my risk? What am I doing to my account if at some point I am wrong, right? Okay, so predetermined levels, predetermined scale in levels. And that was what we did on QQQ. And obviously, well, it worked, right? So I don't want to sit around stating the obvious. Yes, SMH and QQQ are both 2x to actually 2.5x what we paid for them. But that's beside the point, right? Rog, look, we're all trading to make money. Yes, these did very, very well. But the other thing that I want to talk about is the affordability and the scalability of these trades. QQQ was a little on the spendier side. QQQ is usually going to run you in a situation like this, roughly about $5.90, $6 and change, right? So that's about $600 per contract. For some traders, very easy to scale into $600 options. This is not an expensive option, right? To spend $600. But the SMH was really very affordable. So a lot of traders ask me, Rog, do you like NVIDIA? Most of the time, I'd rather scale into positions in SMH, right? And if we like the NASDAQ and Q futures, QQQ, here's where QQQ is going to be so much better than NQ. How much does it cost to take the NQ, initial margin requirement? How much does it cost to take this overnight or into the weekend? A lot, right? I'm trying to think what the last time I saw the initial margin requirement was. It's a lot, right? It's a lot. And that's per contract. You might say, well, what about the micros? What about the QQQ? You know that at a certain increment, the QQQ can, in many ways, replicate the notional value of the NQ futures. So if I'm going to take something overnight, NQ ETF alternative is QQQ, right? So whatever the NQ is doing, I want to mimic that, but use the QQQ calls as a vehicle. So this is a no-brainer, no issue with initial margin requirement to take these remaining options into the weekend. And with a don't fade Friday rally like this, right? That's what I should call the video. Don't fade Fridays. That's exactly what I'm looking for. I'm looking for more follow through. So we had our entry on Thursday, follow through on Friday. I'm looking for more follow through on Monday. So if you watch Tuesday's video and you say, okay, Rog, what about those S&Ps? We set them up, but here's the formula, if you will, right? If I like the S&P, it's because I like the XLK, right, plus the XLF, right? XLK plus the XLF. And that's usually going to give the S&P an advantage. If XLK is doing well, that's going to give the NASDAQ an advantage. If the XLC is doing well, that's also going to give the NASDAQ an advantage. Here's another combination, XLK plus SMH. Once again, disproportionate advantage right here to the NASDAQ, right? But S&P is starting to look really good. And let's talk about why I am in no way letting go of this narrative. Financials had a nice end to the week, but we need to find price action north of 34. If XLF can start getting through 34 and rallying, S&P has a very good chance of outperforming the NASDAQ or performing just as well, which gives us fantastic opportunity in both of these, SPY, QQQ, NASDAQ futures, S&P futures. It's going to be a fantastic way to end the year in what is then structured to be the best bullish follow through. XLK plus XLF, that's S&P. XLK plus SMH right now has been fantastic for the NAS. And it makes sense because the number one weighted stock in SMH is NVIDIA. NVIDIA is not so inexpensive to play, is it? Or it's expensive, isn't it? SMH is a fantastic way to take advantage of it. So think about leveraging this ETF where NVIDIA rules with a lower cost option. All right, and that's exactly what we did, taking it into the weekend. I hope this helps, gang. I hope that the combination of Tuesday's walkthrough and then what we did ultimately on Thursday has taken you into the weekend with some plans for next week. Okay, are we going to get pullbacks? Absolutely. And much like, let's not confuse a pullback with a downtrend or even worse, a crash or whatever else. right? Let's remember that within the context of a trend, these are opportunities, okay? All right, gang. I'll see you on Sunday for Top Tier Outlook right here at the Simpler Trading YouTube channel. Also, my YouTube channel at Raghee Horner. We're going to talk about what it is I have in store for next week, and let's have another great week. If you don't know what we're doing over in the Sector Secrets Mastery, check it out, sectorsecrets.com. I'm also in the Futures Room on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays. All right, gang, onward and upward. I'll see you in the next update.